I find it funny that if the UK government likes to talk such a big game and says we're third in the world when it comes to AI, it's third on a technicality. It's a two-horse race, and we're galloping in a week and a half later when everybody's gone home and all the betting markets have been closed.
Welcome to Crashed, where technology crashes into philosophy, politics, ethics, business, and pretty much everything else. Today, that means artificial superintelligence, the new Cold War, and the LinkedInification of everything. I'm Alex Hudson.
And I'm Chris Stokel-Walker, and very excited for the LinkedInification of everything.
I was at Polato event last night, and there was a whole speech around saying that AI slop has taken over LinkedIn, and now LinkedIn is just slop. And I was like, that's just the algorithm. Also, yes. Polato is a brave brand name.
Yeah, that's a very weird one. But also what's interesting about LinkedIn is that LinkedIn was terrible for a different reason before AI slop invaded it. And I was very mean about LinkedIn. And now LinkedIn actually is the one true place that I inhabit these days. I post every single day on LinkedIn. Not all of it excellent. But then, yeah, you don't have to be very good on LinkedIn anyway, I suppose, Alex.
It's just Facebook with a slightly different brand.
But wearing suits. Facebook, but for suited people. Besuited Facebook.
When was the last time you wore a suit?
Literally last week, because I will tell you more about my travels, Alex. It seems like every week that we meet, I go on a different travel. So I went to Germany this last week, and I talked at the Deutsche Britische Gesellschaft. How's your German like?
Dreadful.
Okay, so Gesellschaft is the hard one in that. That means the cultural exchange. So I was there talking about fake news. If I had been more intelligent and prepared, I would have brought up my book and shown you. It's got a lovely green cover. It's over out of reach, so I won't bother getting it. But basically, it was talking about fake news and the risk that comes from that. And AI slop, which we're going to be talking about today, was a key issue there. So I wore a suit for that. I dressed up for the occasion to speak to expats in Frankfurt and Heidelberg.
What did you say?
I said that fake news is terrible. I said that fake news is alarming. I said that you're not stupid if you are tricked by it and fall foul of its machinations. And I gave some advice on how to try and spot it and what to do in terms of dealing with it. Anyway, when did you last wear a suit?
I wear
Not at the Polato conference or whatever it was. That was probably more like Steve Jobs-y turtlenecks, right?
So there's a new sort of AI Web3 group called Potato, which is meant to be like, because potato is universal and taste in all of these things. And from that, they bought a subscription service where you pay X pounds a month, £5 a month until Christmas, not an ad, £10 after Christmas. And they're now doing events called Polato, and it's all about sharing best knowledge, sharing best practice. Some of it was interesting, some of it was a little bit confusing, some of it was presented by sponsors. It was in a thing that used to be a WeWork in Shoreditch, now isn't. And it was anyway, as we are recording,
yes.
NVIDIA has just passed a $5 trillion valuation. The day after, Apple has passed $4 trillion valuation. And a week past, we and everybody was talking about the AI bubble. Is this a further evidence of the bubble, or is actually NVIDIA really worth $5 trillion?
NVIDIA is worth a lot of money, right? I mean, this is effectively the only game in town for computer chips that can power the AI revolution, at least for now. We have seen some movement in recent days and weeks about companies starting to develop their own hardware. Whether it is worth $5 trillion, not so sure. But I think the market is looking for reasons for this not to be a bubble. And I think that is interesting in and of itself. We have obviously had the OpenAI news where they've kind of transferred into their profit-making arm, and they've had that Microsoft deal as well that we can get onto a little bit's time. And that has kind of pushed the market higher in terms of all the AI stocks as well. So I think we're obviously coming up to big earnings weeks for big tech firms as well. So I imagine that we've still got a little way to climb. I guess the question is whether or not this is just the bubble getting burstier, or whether or not this is actually, well, let me put it this way, Alex. I don't think that this goes up forever. It's not one of those, chart goes up and to the right, memes or whatever it is that you see on the weird corners of finance Twitter. But I do think that the bubble might not burst quite as significantly as people think. And I think that's the fact that NVIDIA's got to $5 trillion is an indication of that. But you might be more skeptical than me.
I don't know how a chip manufacturer is worth $5 trillion. I think it is more a commodity than it is a commercial success story. I think as we're going to come on to, the way that China is producing these chips and these echoes and these copycat stuff for much less money means that there isn't necessarily the market value around it maintaining. And when it comes to original IP, there are relationships, there are business deals, but there isn't that unique patented copyright piece of material that's keeping them to that valuation. I understand that people want to back an AI horse, and I understand why this is the one they've chosen. I don't understand what keeps them there as this progresses.
Well, is it not that they are a few miles ahead in the marathon or a few 100 meters ahead? I mean, you can't be a few 100 meters ahead in the sprint, right? You're 100 meters, but you're like 30 meters ahead in the sprint. While I understand the point about copycats and things like that, there is an inherent and quite a complicated winding up process to the point of actually producing a GPU that the knowledge of which is still constrained within a certain number of companies, which is why we saw, for instance, the Dutch government taking under control a kind of Chinese-linked chip maker in recent weeks to kind of protect that IP, I suppose.
Then that's the thing. I don't know how many countries is NVIDIA dominant in.
All of them now, no, because all of them want GPUs. They're like Dr. Evil. Jensen Huang is like Dr. Evil in a no, he's not. That's terrible. We'll not clip this for the video, but he's like he is astride the world wearing his leather jacket. And actually, it's interesting how much he's become swaggy as a result of this. This is a man who built his business out of a Denny's. He was a super nerd, and he has become the rootingest, tootingest, coolest business bro that there is. And actually, I feel
Hold on. Anybody who is rooting or tooting is not the coolest. I think you're mixing metaphors.
Yeah, I am. Sorry. I'm very, very tired. I traveled a lot again. But I do think that, he is... I think that NVIDIA is in a stronger place, perhaps, than the bubble gives it credit for. I think that they have a while yet to go. He says, knowing that he'll be proven wrong in probably around about a month's time or something like that.
Right. On to what we're actually meant to be talking about, and we mentioned it briefly in the openings. Microsoft and OpenAI have a new agreement to finalize OpenAI's restructure as a for-profit company. What this means is the company being split between a for-profit arm, the OpenAI Group Public Benefit Company, or PBC, and the non-profit OpenAI Foundation. So Microsoft used to own 32.5% of OpenAI, and it now owns around 27%, which is still worth $135 billion. The charitable arm will own 26%, and the rest is still owned by staff and private investors, though in a call on Tuesday, OpenAI's chief executive Sam Altman said the most likely path for the newly formed business is that it becomes publicly traded on the stock market, given the capital needs that we'll have and the sort of size of the company. So that is a huge thing by itself. But perhaps the biggest reason that Microsoft is willing to take a lower stake is because the AI clause is no more. So the original agreement meant Microsoft would have no rights to the AI model after it reached AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, many acronyms, so human equivalent intelligence. And the new deal means Microsoft maintains the rights to the model. That was a lot of an introduction, Chris. What does it mean?
It means that Microsoft can keep the road running for a little bit longer before it has to decide exactly what to do. And I think that it's interesting that there is this trade-off, and you almost have a quantifiable element of that. I'm not going to do maths live on a podcast because I'm really rubbish at it. But if we think of like 135 billion for their stake, they have lost a 5 percentage point stake, obviously, through this new deal, going from 30 odd to 27. If you think about the maths of that, that is a quantifiable element of what it means effectively to have that extra time when AGI is reached, supposedly, and to continue through to, I think, 2032, right, is the date by which they continue this agreement. What's interesting, of course, around the AGI clause is that it was always a bit of a misnomer. It was always a red herring. AGI is something that it's kind of that definition of pornography by a famous judge, right? You know it when you see it, but there's no actual continued agreement on what it is. So That was always a kind of weakness in the agreement that Microsoft had dealt with in terms of OpenAI, where actually Sam Altman could have turned around tomorrow, made a semi-plausible case that AGI had been reached, that their contract would be broken, and therefore they could go it alone. And so I think this is designed to bring a little bit of surety to it by just getting rid of that altogether. What I think it also does is that it's an indication, I think, that certainly Microsoft believes that AGI, whatever you might want to define it as, is closer than we think, right? Because otherwise, why would they have wanted and continued to try and knock down this deal? Because they were the roadblock in this, right? OpenAI obviously wants to make money hand over fist. They've been trying for yonks to try and do this. It's part of the reason why Sam Altman was deposed as CEO for a period of time a couple of years ago. But now, actually, they are able to go ahead with this. Microsoft has withdrawn their opposition to this, in part, I think, because they have a little bit of security going forwards, but also perhaps because they see that this is more advanced than we thought.
So AGI, artificial general intelligence, you're right, has no... I spent too long on this morning trying to work out if there was an agreed definition of AGI, and you come to sort of Asimov law, all of these sort of nonsense sci-fi things. But while the definition is not broadly agreed, what is broadly agreed is that AGI means a wide range of tasks are completed at or above an average human level, not tied to one particular skill set, and that knowledge can transfer between disciplines. It can learn autonomously and can demonstrate reasoning consistently, without that reasoning just being parroted from a listicle in the way that LLMs traditionally have. I struggled with that because the thing that academics are struggling with at the moment is the common sense problem. So the experts talk about causal reasoning and just being able to take this logical step. But if we're using humans as a benchmark, we don't have common sense, right? We're creating this idealized pretend view of what intelligence is, transplanting that into a machine. So can a machine achieve AGI if it forgets the name of the person it's speaking to, if it misses the train, if it loses its keys, if it gets a simple math sum wrong? Because that's the human condition that we've somehow set this standard at, and I don't know why humans are the standard for what AGI is.
I think is in its own way, it tells us a lot about our hopes and our beliefs in what AGI should be, which is that we are holding it, actually, ironically, simultaneously holding it to a human standard by saying that it needs to replicate all of these human-like things, but holding it to a superhuman standard in that we expect it never to make mistakes. And what's fascinating about it is that there are, I think, there is a very fine line between AI not working in the way that we maybe want it to, because it is just stupid, and AI not working the way we want it to because it is working almost like a human. So this morning I asked Gemini to try and summarize all of the newsletters that I get into my Gmail inbox to create one newsletter of newsletters so that I don't have to go through everything that is going on there. It refused, as it does pretty much 60% of the time, to do so because it says that it doesn't have access to my Gmail, which it very clearly does because it has previously done that umpteen times. That is computers being stupid. But when you get to the point of it misremembering names or not even getting names correct, full stop. I mean, I do that all the time. When I was in Germany, I was shaking hands with people. They introduced themselves. Then 2 minutes later, I'm going, I did not take in what that person said. And so I think it's kind of interesting to consider where this is. The problem, of course, also is that AGI's definition is currently in the hands of one of three constituent groups. Number one is potentially a judge, and Elon Musk was keen to try and litigate this in court a couple of years ago when OpenAI started thinking about moving towards the for-profit model, and he wanted to pursue that and get a US district court judge to actually decide on what AGI was, which, gosh, they don't know what the technology is or how it works, so heaven help us there. Or we have to rely on a sort of very small slice of society and humanity, which is academics. So you've said you've been pouring through the academic literature. Let's be honest, academics, and I count myself partly as one of those because that's part of my job, we're not exactly the most adjusted or normal human beings. So why are we going to be able to decide on that? Then the third one is even worse, which is you have the other constituent that will decide on this, which is tech bros and nerds. Again, who are they to decide when AGI is reached? So, it's one of those where I think it will creep up on us in a way that kind of Sora did with its video generation, and just suddenly become a big thing that we kind of assume there won't be any hoopla. Let's put it this way: there won't be a big parade and fireworks. At least I don't think. Do you
Well,
kind of imagine
there
that?
absolutely will be. The amount of money resting on this, the amount of geopolitical power that we're going to come on later, that built into AGI, the amount of just sort of sending a person to the moon sort of level of hubris and propaganda and geopolitics playing out in the sphere is huge. In the same way as the quantum advantage, quantum supremacy thing, it's this being able to say that this thing that's been prophesized in sci-fi for so long is possible is monstrous. And whichever country or whichever organization gets there first, the huge market advantage and geopolitical chat around that advantage.
Do you think that it will be agreed on straight away? Like, do you think it will be a smooth, this happened before and then after moment? Or do you think that actually you will have, because Donald Trump could turn around tomorrow and say OpenAI has reached AGI, and he could say that, and that could shift markets. And it might be just he woke up that morning and decided it.
Well, yeah, until the OpenAI agreement came out, we were going to talk about quantum more in depth. And actually, Google has claimed quantum advantage. Quantum supremacy is something that a traditional computer could never do in a million years. Quantum advantage is something that it would take a traditional computer such a ridiculously long time to do. It's impractical, but not impossible. Google has claimed quantum advantage with its new algorithm. It says it's 13,000 times quicker. Double checking my numbers. 13,000 times.
Yeah,
I have a
well
memory.
done.
So it's with a quantum chip. Ultimately, academics are already skeptical about that claim, and the previous claim around quantum supremacy from Google is very much now it could be done in minutes by a traditional computer with chip advantages. So it's the same thing. It's just a PR stunt. It's a marketing campaign.
Yeah. By the way, I'm very glad that we did not have to devote a whole segment of this podcast to talking about quantum, because that is the most difficult thing to try and make engaging and interesting. Or maybe are you a quantum fanboy and I am doing down on this?
I am a quantum fanboy and carving out my niche. I've just been commissioned to write a deep dive into quantum writing. No, anyway, so back to AI. I think AGI is so far away, and it's become that so same as like, have you seen the 1X Neo robot thing that launched, or at least the Wall Street Journal covered it yesterday? Have you seen that?
I have not, Tommy.
Okay, so it is a humanoid robot that looks like a human and is so like it's the pinnacle of AI, but essentially it just can change a dishwasher and clean up some stuff. And there's 3 webcams in it, or a lot of webcams in it. So if it fails, as it showed off in a demo, it broke and it didn't work. And there was a human operative with like a Meta Quest thing or similar. Who has to manually operate the robot to empty the dishwasher. Like, okay, like why are we so obsessing of it? Firstly, it's not really AI. Secondly, it's this anthropomorphized thing that is the least efficient way of doing it. And we're in that weird marketing stunt bit of the AI gap.
Yeah, interesting on that anthropomorphization of AI and putting it into humanoid robotics, which is interesting. I did a story to a Fast Company recently on this because I thought there was basically a set of not rumors, but kind of reporting that came out of Tesla that they were really struggling to deal with humanoid robot hands. Just the dexterity thing was incredibly difficult. And it prompted a question for me, which was, well, why are we spending all this time trying to design stuff with a bipedal robot with human hands? And I spoke to loads of robotics experts about it, and it kind of changed my mind on this, which is, well, we could just have a quadruped robot like a Boston Dynamics robot dog, which, frankly, has been around for like 15 years or so. I walk around tech conferences. You will have done the same thing. And I just slap my head every time that I see like wide-eyed conference dwellers with their badges and their passes staring agog at this little robot dog because they think that it's the best thing that's ever happened, when in fact actually that is like now 20-year-old technology. But they bring it out because it does look cool, and admittedly it does look cool the first time that you see it, but you also think, well, this is kind of like as far away from the future of technology as maybe not quite like Charles Babbage was or something like that, but it's very, very old now. It starts to get a little bit stinky. But they were making the point that you could just have a quadruped robot with like a gripper of some sort that isn't necessarily a human-like hand. But the reality is that if we want to take advantage of these things, we want them to interact with us side by side in the real world. The world is designed for humans. It's kind of why we are so unique, because we walk on two legs, because we interact in the way that we do. And so that is why they spend all of this time and effort, and 1X does the same sort of thing, in actually developing these very costly, very complicated humanoid robots.
I think, who's the marketing guy who's all over the internet, who came up with the solution for dishwashers? It's just own two dishwashers. One is the clean dishwasher, one is the dirty dishwasher, and you never need shelves again. You just swap them between the two. It is a genius, like such a simple, counterintuitive, brilliant idea. We are off topic. Right, there's a solution section. I'm going to ask you a really, really, really simple question. When will AGI be reached?
October the 31st, 2027.
Easy, done. Google DeepMind execs have repeatedly said around 2030.
So close.
And yet the EU AI Act came into force. There are some saying that will actually slow it down. So all of the nefarious stuff is now banned. That came into effect between February and August this year. And it means that the Pandora's box could be opened elsewhere. So some people are saying that actually 2030 is still ambitious, and if Microsoft only has the license until 2032, it's touch and go as to whether or not that license will see AGI. But if it's coming on October the 31st, 2027, that's really soon.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, the reality is that you can pluck any date out of your head nowadays. We have seen what I think is so significant, and we're both, I think it's fair to say, level-headed / skeptical around a lot of this stuff, and that is by design, which we have set up the podcast to try and remedy some of the hype that goes around this sort of stuff and the breathless coverage, and to try and inject a dose of realism into it. But having said that, also, if you had asked me in January 2020, when I was saying that I was reporting for New Scientist, that you should just look at the earlobes of individuals to see whether or not a photo was deep faked or not, at just less than 5 years down the line, you could have photorealistic, hyper scary, high definition moving video from a single sentence prompt of pretty much anybody in the world, pretty much anywhere in the world. I would have said that would have been 2050. And so our timescales are so telescoped now, and things are changing so quickly that it's very difficult to do this stuff. And that's before you add in the idea of these timescales are always wrong. Like Elon Musk has been telling us that we're going to space next year for the last 10 years or whatever it is. So pretty much draw a number or date or a time out of the hat, and you're likely to be as correct as you are to be proven wrong. Although very few people might put an individual date on it. Do you have a preferred date for when you think it might be reached, or are you hedging your bets with a single year?
The future is always between 15 and 40 years away. I forget the exact quote. That is a horribly satirized and pastiche quote. But the future is always that sort of distance where by the time it comes around, everyone's forgotten you've said it.
Yeah. See, I disagree. I think now that's changing. I think that sci-fi is becoming real. And I think that's the really interesting bit. I think the timescale, maybe 5 to 15 years rather than 15 to 40 now.
If we brief us, like if you look at Minority Report, oh God, oh no, journalism 101. Like one of the first things I was told as a tech journalist was never use Minority Report in a picture, and never ever reference Minority Report in any article. Never do it.
I used to like that movie a lot when I was a teenager.
I still like that film. It's a good film. Anyway, and we might cut this because there was a good segue into what we're going to talk about next. Then I went off on Minority Report. No, it's entirely my fault. But we are going to talk about the AI Cold War, and we'll get into that after this short break. Welcome back. Apparently, we're in an AI Cold War. The algorithm served it to me this week. It kept serving it to me this week. I went down a rabbit hole, then it kept serving it to me and serving it to me. Then I convinced Chris to talk about it with me, and God, it's complicated. I thought I'd gone down too many cul-de-sacs until the Manchester Centre for Digital Development paper assured me that the AI Cold War is real, and it argues, and I quote, that the framing is largely driven by the secularization of AI, the discursive process in which state actors and policy pundits view AI innovations' dual-use capabilities as key to national security and ideological competition in the rivalry between a hegemony and a rising power, which is the most academese way of saying I'm sort of right.
I was going to say that whole sentence is the reason why journalists still need to exist, is our job day in, day out is to translate this into stuff that you could actually understand. So, feel lucky that we still exist and that we haven't yet been automated and outmoded by AI. So what is the AI Cold War then, Alex? Because I'm intrigued, by how this has been pumped directly into your brain, and I wonder whether it is some sort of deep CCP plot to try and get you talking about this, or if there is a legitimate thing behind this.
So here's what I found. If we take the original Cold War built on the principle of mutually assured destruction, so that people are so well equipped that no one will do anything because everybody could kill everybody else. The assumption with this one is that whoever wins this can define the next generation of economic, social, and political dominance. So it means that no one will try and execute autocratic control over any AI power if they manage it first, is the principle. So this means that control over advanced chips, fabrication, AI infrastructure becomes a weapon, and whoever controls the pipelines being akin to who controls the nukes. So far, that sounds more like a race than a war.
Yeah.
So I'm going to recommend we don't talk about autonomous drones or lethal autonomous weapon systems. They're called laws because that's more literal war.
Yeah.
But what China is doing in this Cold War is essentially copying what the US is doing. So DeepSeek copied OpenAI, or copied is a loose term, Omnihuman closely echoes VO. And the point of that in January was that DeepSeek could directly fuck up NVIDIA's share price and fuck up OpenAI's share price. And turns out that's had zero link. But where there is there was such a roundabout way, but where there is this Cold War is within China's Belt and Road Initiative. So if you are unaware of it, China's Belt and Road is China's soft power, where they're providing infrastructure support, particularly around ports and around transport infrastructure, to make sure that they have, depending on which side of the argument, they either have control or they just have good relations with these broadly developing countries. And what is happening there is they're really pushing hard to bring AI into those developing nations. And that's the really juicy bit. So when we race towards AGI, it will be the people who have and the people who haven't. And what China is trying to do is make sure that it has control over the pipelines to who gets it, when they get it, how they get it, and how that shapes the global conversation around it.
And that is an interesting concept, right? Because there is a trade war going on around AI. There is an economic war, as you mentioned, in terms of the kind of DeepSeek moment and how that upended the markets. But then there is very much this soft power war. It's the equivalent of McDonald's in Red Square, or parking tanks and Levi jeans and things like that, of trying to shift these perceptions and become the favored norm. What's fascinating about this is that I think that countries are doing it in both ways, and they are certainly seemingly focused on particularly global south developing countries. So just this last week, ChatGPT, which again, we're not talking kind of state level control here, but there is a closeness, I suppose, between Sam Altman and Donald Trump at the minute. They have Stargate, they have all of these projects and things like that. They have been offering effectively soft power tools in the sense of discounted or sometimes free access to the high-level tools to governments. Likewise, there was a cut-down version of ChatGPT that had been available in India only at a very low price. I think it was called ChatGPT Go. They just announced this last week that they are now making that entirely free. It's designed basically for lower income individuals who maybe can't afford the $20 a month subscription for the higher tiers of ChatGPT. So it's kind of like a middle ground. And they're expanding that out into different countries as well. I don't know. I find it fascinating, though, because I suppose there is an imbalance in terms of the levers of state control in this as well. Like the US is always, it feels, going to be a little bit more sluggish simply because of private enterprise and capitalism and individual choice.
I don't think that's decided yet. So there are, once again, too far down the rabbit holes, but there are versions for and against whether or not collaboration is helping. The same way that in the first Cold War, actually being at odds with each other moved innovation quicker. It made the journey to the moon much, much quicker than otherwise it would be. And the other reason they pumped so much money into it was because of the geopolitical stakes of it. This time, there has to be convergence, because without it, you can't have a single programming language. You can't have a single conversation in a globalized world. And so with that convergence, and there's where the interesting discussion is, it's who controls the conversation, who's the moral arbiter, what is good, what is moral, what is just. So James Yunil who's the chair of computing and communications engineering at Hyung Cyber University in South Korea, apologies if I butchered that name, said, rather than reacting to crises after they emerge, the US must adopt a proactive, anticipatory approach, framing AGI not simply as a scientific frontier, but as a geopolitical and ethical imperative. Leadership in this space requires more than technical superiority. It demands the cultivation of global norms that prioritize human dignity, democratic resilience, and collective security. And that's the Cold War. Will late-stage capitalism triumph against whatever China's version of socialism, communism, is this sort of smushy thing, and in a way that TikTok gets criticized for being able to move its algorithm. I think those statements are overblown, but TikTok can influence those people who are very online's view by pushing certain views over other views. With AGI, and particularly with LLMs, if one person or one company wins that race, the way that discussion can be packaged can be manipulated, and that's the Cold War around communication, propaganda, and discussion on those terms.
It feels much higher stakes, doesn't it? I suppose, and this gets down to that idea of AI poisoning that we often we have seen Russia trying to shift the narrative that comes out of LLMs when you ask it certain questions in the West by putting out propaganda websites that are designed to feed in to that as training data. It's not out of the realm of possibility that China could do the same sort of thing, or probably is already doing the same sort of thing. But then if you have everybody using DeepSeek anyway, and that is with speaking with a Chinese accent and with a Chinese sensibility, then I suppose that becomes the case. I suppose my question skeptically would be, would we as a society be willing to accept that? Because I think that we're all aware, mostly at least, of the risks of China's soft power ambitions and the way that they try and communicate what they want in society from us and to us. And I wonder whether actually we would stomach an AI has a Chinese centralized state sensibility, or most of us would anyway.
So I think with that, I don't think anybody knows the real answer to that, because it's incredibly complicated. But if you look at how willingly we take to TikTok, and actually when you work through TikTok's algorithms and through the transparency work that they've been doing, TikTok is less opaque, not transparent, is less opaque than some of what Meta's doing, some of what Google and Alphabet are doing. And in that, they are no worse when it comes to their algorithm shift than some of the other companies. And TikTok has the best algorithm and is broadly the most popular, particularly when it comes to watch time. So in that, if that's the test case, then Western societies don't have a particular problem for that, unless the rhetoric prevails that you are being dictated to. And that's not the case yet. And people are still seeing things that they want to consume.
Yeah, but I think there is a degree of difference between an algorithm that is only semi-transparent, but is still designed to be tailored to your specific interests and is hosting and presenting back to you Western content creators, versus an AI chatbot where you can't ask about Tiananmen Square. The argument that I always found really odd against TikTok and why people used it, I never really understood, was it's like you could have you never did, because people have looked into this and not been able to find it. And I wrote a book on TikTok and couldn't find the secret evidence that showed that this was a state-sponsored plot or anything like that. You can never, even if you could find that evidence that there was someone putting out a change to the algorithm designed to try and support Chinese viewpoints, the creators are still creating the content. And so if there's no creation of that sort of stuff at scale, then that's never going to be served to users. Whereas I can imagine an AI model being served to millions of users very quickly with this sort of stuff and being found out relatively quickly that it is very much biased in that way, rather than kind of the TikTok idea.
A final question before we move on. Why haven't we talked about the EU? Why haven't we talked about Japan, South Korea, Israel, India, the UAE? They're all investing billions into AI and quantum, and yet I appreciate it's my posit. I've talked about the Cold War, so it's entirely my fault. Why is the US and China the only names in town when it comes? And it is just the ease at which it's two global powers, and it mirrors the old way of thinking about warfare.
It's because everybody else is competing for third place, and it's a distant third, right? The quantities of money involved in this are such that even at 450 million people, 27 countries, the EU can't compete. And you only need to look at, God bless all the people that love Mistral. Great that you do. Great that we have a European unicorn. Sorry, but it's like you sticking with Firefox, right? I mean, it could be worse. You could be sticking with Opera or DuckDuckGo or something like that. But you're always going to be using the third place browser nowadays.
Is Tor still operating?
Oh my gosh, yeah, Tor is still operating. But I mean, that's a separate thing. That's a very specific use case for this. But we're fighting over the runner-up prize and like the conciliatory chocolate that you get for doing well and taking part rather than anything else. There is no competition. This is why also I find it funny that if the UK government likes to talk such a big game about this sort of stuff and says we're third in the world or whatever when it comes to AI, like it's third on a technicality, which is it's a 2-horse race, and we're galloping in a week and a half later when everybody's gone home and all the betting markets have been closed effectively.
That sad state of where British innovation is probably a good place to end it. We'll be back in a minute for part 3. Welcome to part 3, the ever-changing last section until we actually land on something that we're interested in sticking with. This one, so far, I have high hopes, has the most chance of sticking so far. The questions we don't have answer to, but we will try and answer them anyway. Question 1, why has Elon Musk launched Grokpedia? I have no idea. Well, no, I do know because it's Elon Musk, but I don't know the actual mechanics why he's done it.
He's done it because he is spiteful, I think. I don't think that's necessarily the correct full answer, but I think that he just hates anything that is woke, and he thinks that it's woke. It's not, by the way. Like, the whole point of Wikipedia is that it can be edited by anybody. It is the wisdom of the crowd. It is such that actually you cannot kind of shape it one way or the other, and if there is a big enough band of people who disagree with you, then your idea will not be there. And so I think that actually there is a reason why he is doing this, which is just that he has more money than sense. He is able to set this sort of thing up, and he's thought that this is a cool fillip for him to be able to talk to his anti-woke audience and say that he is fighting the good fight for free speech.
I spent at least 3 minutes on Grokpedia,
reading
Elon Musk, at least 3 minutes. And I just read Elon Musk's page, and I don't think a couple of those things would pass Wikipedia's editing policy. I'm not saying they wouldn't. I'm just saying that perhaps there might be some citation notes required.
Yes, just a bit. What's also interesting is that it seems to be regurgitating large parts of Wikipedia full stop. So, saying that he wants it to be completely different from what has gone before, it's actually just repeating the same old.
Wikipedia is a monopoly, or has monopoly. Can a not-for-profit have monopolistic powers? That's a more profound question. And does Wikipedia need something that has an alternate view?
Those things exist, right? I mean, you see those. You see those in the huge numbers of fan-run Wikipedia sort of style websites focused on specific things, like your favorite anime characters have their own specialized Wikipedia where people get into the lore of it. There are alternatives out there. We also have these things called books, actually. I'm in my university office, and I've contributed to some world events summary that has been around since the 1700s, did the tech sector for 2024 there. And those things do exist still. It's just that actually Wikipedia is so convenient that it has become a kind of major thing. Were you ever a Wikipedia editor? You seem like the type, Alex, who might have been a little bit of a Wikipedia editor in
that a compliment
younger days.
Or
well, I'll let the listeners decide on that.
I think I was too BBC at the point where I might have been, and so at that point I had zero opinions. And the idea of getting caught up with anything that became a Daily Mail headline was so much more trouble than it was worth. And so, no. However, I am now deep in that. I'm currently playing Borderlands 2 too much on my little Switch, and so I'm deep in the wiki lore of Borderlands, which is, that shows that I could be a Wikipedia editor. Question 2. Why on earth did Albania's Prime Minister, Edi Rama, decide to announce his AI minister, Diala, was pregnant with 83 children? Did you see that story?
Did not. What?
The Albania's Prime Minister was on a Berlin conference. It was televised. And his AI minister is a robot, well, is an AI, and so he announced that this AI was pregnant with 83 children, so all the politicians could have access to their own individual AI. Just so happens that 83 is a number of people within his ruling party, not the number of MPs, the number within his ruling party could get access to this. And it was such a weird interaction about actually. It's anthropomorphizing to the nth degree of two men on stage announcing an AI firstly is female, secondly can get pregnant, and it was weird.
Yeah, and this, I mean, again, let's check our bias here. Two white middle-aged men talking about technology, right? Fully own up to that. Tech has a big problem with creating these tools, particularly AI assistants, and then giving them sexy voices and women's names. If it's happening in the Albanian government, we need to get out of this horrific thing. We can create a new whole thing for AI assistants. We don't need to pretend that they are human-like. We could actually have them being genderless. We can have them being nameless. We can have them being just a collection of consonants if we want. We don't need to call them Siri or Dear or whatever the Albanian AI that has given birth to 83 children is. It's just icky. Let's stop it, please, because we're now at the point where we really need to do this. I mean, I say let's stop it, but then Sam Altman says that he's willing to have OpenAI start engaging with flirtatious chats with you and things like that, and getting into the kind of saucier end of this. Having said that, he wouldn't do that. So I think we're heading in the wrong direction now. I mean, gosh, like I'm speechless, Alex. Actually, I don't really know what to say to that.
It was sort of, there was all sorts of laughing and joking. It was very masculine in the worst sense of the word. Anyway, final question from me. Has everything become LinkedInified now? And is that just because it's the only platform that provides any click-throughs to anything, and everything else has become just video?
Yeah, I think certainly we've been subsumed by slop, and we talked a little bit about that with Sora in the past. But I think I'm going to ride to the defense of LinkedIn. I think that actually, again, it's like being the king of the world's worst country. But LinkedIn, I think, is the best social platform out there right now, actually. Waiting for you to kind of vehemently disagree with me on this.
So I am quoting or taking inspiration. So this Polato thing last night, she was speaking. It's meant to be a Chatham House thing, but she was giving a presentation, and she was promoting a book. So if it's bad, I'm sorry. Lisa Remus, who's an accessibility expert, and they were talking about very much that the problem that AI has created is that everything has become beige. So all of these people who can't write are just pumping their stuff into AI, and then they're outputting that into LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has become the primary source of generic, here's my business proposal, and all of the memes that have come from it, from like, oh, I just came from my grandma's funeral, but that made me think about how to launch a new Coinbase competitor. All of the sort of lowest common denominator bits of the algorithm, because I think you're right, LinkedIn is a good place and it's less toxic than everywhere else, apart from a few unsolicited DMs that I am not legally allowed to talk about that I would let you know about afterwards. They are horrific.
Okay.
But for the most part, it's a less toxic place, but the algorithm is significantly less advanced, and
Yes.
it doesn't quite get the attention economy in the same way as some of the others do. And so I think it's good in that it's more wholesome, but it's not as good when it comes to grabbing attention, the attention economy. It's doing wonders because it is more amateur hour than the others.
Yeah, and I think that is sweetly naive that we can have that kind of platform in 2025. I agree with you that we are being, submerged in all of this stuff, and actually it's becoming harder and harder to separate the really nice bits of content, the really original bits of content. There was a survey that I saw recently that suggested an alarming number of content creators generally across platforms are using generative AI in some way, shape, or form, either to try and create ideas for their content or actually in the production of it, which is a bit worrying. But to me, at least, if you can find it, you are more likely to find a original bit of content amongst all of the chaff on LinkedIn. But I do worry that actually, and comes back to that Sora thing, we're being the volume of AI slop is such that actually there is a tipping point beyond which it becomes not worth looking for. I think that's where we're starting to see the decline of social media. And that's the long run thing that we've talked about in the past, sort of since 2022, a declining proportion of time spent on social media, only getting worse, I think, because just frankly, it's harder to find original content and to make those sorts of honest connections. That was the original promise of this technology.
Do you have any questions?
I do. I had a really pressing one for you. So we've talked about the timescale of AGI, and you've given your assessment of it, and I've given mine. Mine was more specific, let the record show. So I want to ask you about an equally important bit of technology, which is the AI button on your keyboard. Windows PCs. You don't have a Windows PC, I appreciate, but lots of people do. And AI buttons are now becoming a big thing because Windows 11 is upon us, and it's AI everywhere. AI as far as you can see. So when do you think that an AI button will have any actual practical use case at all?
I don't think it will. I think by the time that an AI button would ever have any practical use, you'll have gone beyond having to press a button. So in the same way as the much hated on Magic Bar in the MacBook, where it was this all sort of interactive, beautiful thing that they binned because no one used it, even though it was fantastic. Clearly, it was brilliant, and I'm so annoyed they got rid of it. The AI button is this mini disc thing where if you're having to push a button to let it know that you want to use AI, which AI? How do you set up your automations? It should already be automatic in the agentic world. Windows might try it, granted, but it will be a fad, and it will be used by less tech-savvy people, as all of the people more ingrained into the way that AI is going will already have agentic AI to know and pick up whenever it assumes that you will want to use it.
And is that going to be part and parcel of a web browser then? Or is that just going to be within your OS?
Now you've fulfilled the brief of questions that actually we have no answer to. There has to be a post-browser world. And
careful,
I think
you're getting very, very minority reporty here.
And I think we will reach that post-browser world before we get into true contact lens-like wearables. So I don't know where we go between the browser and integrated wearables, whether that be internal injections, nanobots, whatever, or more reasonably just contact lenses or glasses. So no idea, which is the point of this bit. See, it's a great bit.
Excellent.
What's your view on that?
The metaverse.
No,
no, that's the answer. The metaverse. That's your punchline.
I still believe in the metaverse. I've lectured on the metaverse. I still think it has huge potential, just not in Zuckerberg's hands.
Okay. In that case, I have an old copy of The Sims that I would love to sell you for £1 million.
Have you seen Grand Theft Hamlet?
I have not.
Then that essentially it was during COVID, so not real life, but they find this auditorium within GTA and they say, right, shall we just put on Hamlet? So they try and go around, recruit people to be in this performance of Hamlet. It is, for everyone, it is one of the best pieces of cinema I've seen in a long time. It is so funny and so heartfelt and so heartwarming and so charming about the weird and wonderful bits of humanity that end up on GTA willing to take part in Hamlet. And the alien with his bum out is absolutely the main character. It's so funny. It's just beautiful. Exactly the sort of humanity that you want from the world. And that is the metaverse. So when GTA 6 comes, is very likely to change the way that gaming operates, and people will essentially live in that space. And that's a real clear step in the metaverse. It's just not having terrible video calls with just people dressed as like 1995 video game characters. It's not going to be that. It's going to be this beautiful, interactive by choice, not by work or by necessity.
As long as all the characters have legs in GTA 6, then it is already an improvement.
I'm sure there'll be a mod that can take it, but like the fly magic. I'm such a hard cover. Anyway, Right. So, Chris, how can people contact you?
They can follow me on X. I am at Stokel, Stokel, or they can visit my website and find me there.
And I'm on Alex Huds, AlexHuds, across all of the major networks. And now I have to do a bit of admin. This podcast was produced by Everything Popular Is Wrong, and the theme music is from an artist called Nuffer. You should check them out. They are great. And we will be back next week for more Crashed.